Bonjour à tous, ici Paul Ponssot pour un nouveau podcast d'Au-delà de l'illusion et aujourd'hui j'ai le plaisir d'interviewer en anglais Jerry Marzinsky et Jinean Florom. Jinean et Jerry se sont connus par le biais d'une expérience qu'a vécue Jinean avec son fils. Et ce que va nous décrire Jinean, c'est extrêmement tragique et en même temps extrêmement important parce que ça montre comment la médecine occidentale se trompe totalement sur la nature de la schizophrénie. Ça montre également que les entités qui sont derrière certaines formes de schizophrénie, même un grand nombre de cas, pour ne pas dire la majorité de cas de schizophrénie, sont des entités absolument démoniaques, ce sont des ennemis du genre humain. Et à l'heure actuelle, dans le milieu New Age notamment, mais aussi dans le milieu alternatif et même dans le milieu de la religion, beaucoup de personnes ont tendance à prendre à la légère ces entités. Or, le témoignage de Jinean va nous montrer qu'il n'y a rien à prendre à la légère, que ce sont des entités démoniaques. Il faut dire les choses telles qu'elles sont. Ce sont des ennemis du genre humain. Et cette interview va aussi montrer le courage de Jinean et la force de l'esprit humain, parce que Jinean a vécu des épreuves absolument terribles et elle a réussi à les surmonter, elle a réussi à se reconstruire. Et avec Jinean, donc Jerry Marzinsky, que vous connaissez tous, c'est le spécialiste du phénomène des voix intrusives, autrement dit des entités. Et donc, voilà le thème de l'interview. Cette interview sera en anglais. Et après la présentation en anglais, je vais laisser la parole à Jinean et Jerry. So, hello all of you. This is Paul Ponssot from Au-delà de l'illusion, Beyond the Illusion. And today, I have the pleasure of having Jinean Florom and Jerry Marzinsky. Now, Jinean is going to tell us about her son's experience with the intrusive voice phenomenon. And what she's going to tell us is extremely tragic and also extremely important, because her testimony will say that Western medicine has got it totally wrong with schizophrenia. Also, Jinean's testimony will show that the entities behind the majority of cases of schizophrenia are demons. They are enemies of the human race, and they are there to destroy. And that's what Jinean will say will counterbalance what a lot of people in the New Age movement, but also in the religious movement, are saying, and that is they're saying, well, they are entities, but they're not really nasty. Maybe if you give them love and all that, they'll just go like that. And we were talking about the backstreet exorcists that basically take those entities for something trivial. Well, they are not trivial. They are the enemies of the human race. And this is something that's very, very important. Also, Jinean's testimony will show us the nature and the strength of the human spirit, because after what Jinean went through, she managed, and she's managing to cope and to live a life and to just live. And after what she's been through, It just shows how strong the human spirit, the human soul is. Also, Jerry Marzinsky will also be on the show, as you've seen, and Jerry is really the specialist of the intrusive voice phenomenon, because he's really managed to define what the intrusive voice phenomenon is and how it affects us. And without further ado, Jerry, could you introduce Jinean?
Okay. Yeah, I want to kind of give a little bit of a introduction to the whole mess here. Bonjour à tous aussi. We've all heard of stories of serial killers who've done horrible things, and when they were arrested, they told the judge, they told the jury, it was the voices told me to do that. And they listen to that and they go, what's the voices? You did that. And they're going, no, I didn't do that. The voices did that. And it does not compute. You know, they go, what are you talking about? Well, you're a nutter. We're going to disregard anything you say. Jinean's story is one of where her son was taken over by these voices. And past a certain point, these people are not coming back. The voices have complete control of them, and they tell them to do horrible things. You never see them telling them to do good things. They tell them to do horrible things. Jinean's story is also a story of the classic failure of the Western mental health system. It's a friggin' joke what the psychiatric mafia is doing, what Big Pharma is doing. The drugs that the Big Pharma is selling and making billions of dollars a year selling, just on antipsychotic drugs. I think it's $37 billion a year they're making on the sale of these toxic drugs that rot out your central nervous system, shrink your brain, and turn you into a zombie. They cure absolutely nothing. They're very expensive, and the side effects are a nightmare. They're awful. They can't, you know, the people who are put on these drugs, virtually all of them eventually go off because the side effects are so crappy. If you look at Big Pharma, they're behind all of this. They fund 75% of the commercials you see on TV are Big Pharma commercials. The psychiatric mafia is insisting that only their meds can be used to treat schizophrenia. There's nothing else. That's a friggin' flagrant lie. There are systems out there now that will cure schizophrenia in most cases that are not really severe without these drugs. And I talk about them on my website. You know, what they've done over here is that they've emptied out the state hospitals and dumped all these psychotic patients onto the streets, and assuming that they were going to go to mental health centers, and then they defunded the mental health centers, and these people are on the street. So most of these people you see on the street corners here or in cities are mentally ill patients that can't support themselves. They can't hold a job, so they're sleeping in tents. San Francisco is a classic example. The prisons are full of these people where they use illegal drugs to try to cope with the voices, which psychiatry has labeled hallucinations, but they haven't done one single study on the voices at all. Matter of fact, when I was dealing with psychotic patients at the state hospitals, they would, when psychiatry found out I was asking patients what these voices were telling them, I was ordered to stop immediately, that I was making them worse because I was inflaming their hallucinations. But the voices turned out not to be hallucinations. You know, it is the voices that drive paranoid schizophrenia. If you get rid of the voices by any means, paranoid schizophrenia disappears. So the prisons are full of these people. You know, the psychiatric mafia is running one of the biggest scams there is. They've got this dictionary or directory of statistical mental illnesses. Every single one of those is made up. It's totally made up. There is not a single clinical test that exists that proves any of these, 273 mental illnesses now that they have in the DSM. And they're selling this thing to the universities for millions of dollars and selling it to the clinical community. Every single one of these is It's a sliver of human behavior that they've chopped into pieces and turned into a malady, turned into a mental disorder. Um, you know, the voices are energetic entities. They are not hallucinations. They run well-defined patterns. A series of some 23 well-defined patterns. If they're running patterns, they are not hallucinations. Hallucinations don't run patterns. And the psychiatric mafia insists that they are hallucinations without any research into the matter at all. The antipsychotics, I mean, these are energetic entities. So pouring antipsychotic drugs on top of them doesn't really affect them. What it does is it mucks up the brain, turns the patient into a zombie. It does not get rid of the voices. It may quiet them down some, but it does not get rid of them. The effect of antipsychotic drugs on these voices, which drive paranoid schizophrenia, is exactly the same of trying to pour antipsychotic drugs on a magnetic field in an attempt to get rid of that magnetic field. They are energetic entities. They are not physical. They exist in an energetic universe where there's no time, space, or matter. So they can follow these people anywhere. And the classic example of the failure of this entire crappy system dominated by the psychiatric mafia and big pharma, which are poisoning these people with these drugs, is Jinean's story. Her son has been on these medications over and over and over again. The side effects were awful. The voices kept continuing, growing stronger. He wouldn't stay on those medications, and they eventually took him over. I've seen other patients in the prison system where I worked in the psych department where the voices have also taken them over. Once they get to a certain point, there's no coming back. There's nothing you can do about it. And the end result is Jinean's story. So I'm going to turn you over to Jinean. She's going to tell you her experience with the voices, with the struggle with her son and the medications and the psychiatric mafia and the hospitalizations and the whole ball of wax. I'll be chiming in from time to time. Go ahead, Jinean, it's all yours.
So my son Donovan was diagnosed with schizophrenia when he was 12. And that's a very young age to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. And the reason why he was diagnosed is because he got violent with my two younger sons. He tried to suffocate one of them, and he hit my youngest one over the head with a basketball, and he was videotaped by my then husband, who had a secret camera, who videotaped him doing this. And when I watched the video, I was in utter shock, and I decided to go ahead and make a move to have Donovan psychologically evaluated. And that landed him in the Pueblo State Hospital in that particular time of frame. And a few months went by, and then we got to go visit him, and that's when the diagnosis of him was released about his schizophrenia. And there were periods of time when he was straitjacketed. He was given medication. He got violent with other people inside, the group of people. And then he started to get a little better. He was there for about a year and a half till he was about 15. Well, not quite 15. He was 13, 14, about 14 and a half. And what happened was during that period of time, he was medicated, heavily medicated. And during that period of time, they didn't really encourage us to go to the state hospital a lot. I did a lot of telephone conversations with the doctors, and so did my husband then. And what ended up happening was, we thought he was getting better, then he was released and he came back. And then he was on the medication for about, till he was about 16. And I pulled him out of school and I started homeschooling him because he was not functioning in a group of people very well. And then he started getting sick and he would say, Mom, I can't. And he was literally a walking zombie. Donovan was a very energetic kid. He learned how to fly an airplane before he learned how to drive a car. He was in Civil Air Patrol. He was extremely astute in the English language and he wanted to go to school to be a lawyer. very knowledgeable, very intelligent, high IQ, very strong. You know, there were certain things about Donovan that were just, you know, really cool. When he was not angry or violent, he was fun to be around. He's my son, okay? So then when he got off the medication, he would get very violent. And he shot my cows. I had a farm. I've always tried to have a small farm over the years. And he would shoot the cows. He would get violent with other people. He got violent at school. He took bananas and plugged the buses up with bananas and he would literally say that he had 3 friends that were imaginary friends that told him to do these things.
So these were the voices, and these are the kind of things that the voices tell these people to do, especially violence toward others when they're young is one of the classic symptoms. So.
And the abuse of the animals, that was pretty awful, because the ranch hands would call me, and you know, I worked and lived in Denver, and Donovan worked in this, you know, lived at the ranch and went to school in the country, and it was always one thing after the other. The drama of raising a child that has schizophrenia. There is never a peaceful moment. There's always something that comes up that is you have to deal with as mom.
Okay, so what's going on in his head at that time is the voices appear, they sound just like his regular thoughts.
Yes.
And they start convincing him that they are his regular thoughts, but their intent is very different, you know, like the damage that he's doing.
Yes. Like it's okay. He thinks it's okay in his head.
Right, because it sounds just like his regular thoughts, but the intent is very different. And that's how you tell the voices apart from the person's own thoughts, because they sound the same. Mm-hmm. You know, it sounds just like your regular thoughts, but it comes in and like, oh, do this, do that. And the patients I've had who actually ask the voices, who are you? What are you? The voices would come back and say, we're you.
Yeah.
And if they can convince them that they are them, then they become the voices.
Sorry to interrupt, but how did the voices get in? Did anything happen to Donovan when he was 12? Did he dabble into the occult? Did anything traumatic happen to him? Did he take a drug of some description? Because usually when demonic possession happens, there's a stimuli of some description for the voices to get in. Did anything happen to Donovan around that time?
Ouija boards.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And no, when I was 16 years old when I had Donovan, so I was a very young mother, very naive mother. When Donovan was 4 years old, I got involved with a man much older than me, and he abused both of us. And he abused Donovan sexually, and I was unaware of it. And I did not know about this abuse until Donovan was in the state hospital, and the doctors told me and my husband at that time that Donovan had been sexually abused, and they validated it by certain things that they did. And so because it was a physical and there was scar tissue involved, and so you know they validated it.
That would do it.
And so he was 4 or 5 at that time, and so that was a complete shock to me, and that's when, you know, he escaped from his mind. He dissociated, and it went on for quite a while. And then I was able to get out of that relationship, but the damage was already done. And so when, you know, all of a sudden, all of these, he's acting out all of this violence and everything, that's when it was discovered. And so, yes, to answer your question, but no, on the other part of it, he was in sports. He was in school. He loved to study. He loved to read. He loved to write. It was much deeper than any of the surface stuff. I wasn't the best perfect mom, believe me, under any circumstances, because I did work a lot. But I do want you to know that Donovan exhibited these behaviors, but they're so much deeper than just the surface of what was going on in the exterior of his world at that particular time.
And Jeanette, what did he tell you when you found out he had 3 friends? What did you do? What were you thinking? What did he tell you about them?
Well, I asked him what their names were, and they had names. Now, I'm not going to say their names, but they had names. And then over the course of time, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but over the course of time, when he came to visit me in 2017, and Paul, I don't know if you saw Windows on the World, but there is a video of him on the porch, and he's like completely possessed, and he's just totally violent, and I had to lock him out of the house. It was just a horrible event. I asked him that year what happened to those, and I've talked with Jerry about this, and what we think happened was the 3, they either left, or one came back, or they formed one entity, because the one that was inside of him was so much more powerful and so much more stronger and so much more evil. These other ones seem to be playmates, and all kids have a certain amount of imagination, and as a parent we sort of ignore some of that stuff, but children up to a certain age do see in the spiritual realm more so than what we do as adults, and there's been scientific evidence that shows that. However, as Donovan got older and the violence got worse, and the medication, and we had to stay on top of it with going to doctors and everything. Yeah. The abuse was definitely a tragic event in his life that affected him.
That would do it.
And he watched me be abused. And so not only did he see him, have to deal with what he dealt with, but he had to watch me be abused as well, which was not healthy for him at all.
So when did you notice that he was hearing voices, and what effect did that have on you and him?
Well, when he was young, I didn't really put too much onto it, because I was 16, 17, 18, 19 years old. Not really. I was trying, just try to survive and be a mom. But later on, and especially after he was diagnosed, I knew there was something wrong that was deeper than, what could be. And I was grateful for the diagnosis, but I can't say I necessarily agreed with the medication, because I haven't really been pro medication for much of that. But when I was made aware that he had schizophrenia and I became to understand, I had to learn. It was let me put it to you this way. I got a crash course in what schizophrenia was, but not necessarily what it was. It was mostly what I was being told by the doctors from a pharmaceutical level, and why the medicines were so important, because I asked a lot of questions because I didn't know what it meant. But when you're living in it and you see it's the actions of the person with schizophrenia and everyday life that as a mom you witness, and not what you're being told, that develops that understanding of what the voices are. And unless you're living in it and you have a family member who has schizophrenia and you're living with it every single day, you cannot absolutely fully grasp what schizophrenia is with the voices till you are in it and living with it on a very daily basis. And as a mom, that's what you deal with.
And that's another lie that the pharmaceutical industry and the psychiatric mafia have perpetuated on the population, that these voices are due to a chemical imbalance and that they are hallucinations. They have no proof for either one of them. Matter of fact, the chemical imbalance theory was developed by a pharmaceutical industry. They knew it was wrong at the time. They knew they didn't have any evidence for it, and they pushed it anyway to make money. So you've been told a lie that schizophrenia and the voices are due to a chemical imbalance in the brain. It's been disproven. They have no evidence for it whatsoever. It's only to sell drugs.
Something to that. I was talking to this lady, and she was attacked by her sister, who was diagnosed as schizophrenic. And she said what shocked her the most was her sister, who was 5 feet tall, just jumped on her and put her on the floor. And she said it was as if it was somebody that was 100 kilos on her.
Yes.
There was a superhuman strength, and she just couldn't get up, and
Yeah.
she was just praying not to be killed.
They become supernaturally strong. I've seen that in the prison. They bounce around 2 big guards, one small, schizophrenic bounce around 2 big guards inside of the cell like they're popcorn. They just become supernaturally strong. I mean, it's not anywhere near normal. When they get enraged. And I've had some prisoners who didn't want to get rid of the voices because the voices would make them furious and they would get strong and nobody would mess with them. And prison guards learn the hard way that they start messing with a schizophrenic prisoner, they're in for trouble. They only do it once.
Yeah, Donovan was extremely strong, and to this very day has an incredible amount of strength that is frightening, literally, because Donovan's 5'9", weighs anywhere between 160 to 180. I've seen him as much as 210. But even when he was in his worst with his meth use at 160 and lower, this kid, and he had extremely long arms. His arm reach was 4 inches on each arm, longer than because from the span of your arms is exactly how tall you are from the middle finger to the middle finger. And his arm reach has 4 inches longer on both sides of his arm. So his arms, where they would hang normally down, like, above the knees, his almost go to his knees. So he's got that figure anomaly.
Jinean, when did you first learn that he was hearing something or something else was controlling him?
I started noticing, and we just talked about this recently, I started noticing him playing with his playmates when he was 4.
What did you see?
He would just be, talking to these other, he'd be outside playing, and he would just have conversations, and he, it was just little kid stuff that you just don't really pay attention to. But when we had that conversation the other day and we were talking about the depth of it, I said, I have a memory that has surfaced that Donovan, I remember when he was playing, he had these friends, and I remember.
Were they good friends or bad friends?
They weren't bad friends. They didn't, honestly, I think until Donovan started abusing the boys then, and the abuse of the animals, is when I really started seeing there was something
really wrong.
Logically wrong. And it was narcissistic to a point, because for Donovan on the narcissism side, I have to say this, because when my 2 sons were born, when they were born, there was some jealousy because there was a 12-year difference in age. And Donovan had always just been the light of my life. Okay, he always got all the attention. So there was a lot of jealousy that happened in this with the birth of my other 2 children. And so that was something I had to contend with. And so Donovan became more attention seeking.
Okay. When did he start scaring you with his behavior?
When I started noticing bruising, and I went to my husband then and said, there's bruising happening on these kids, and I don't know where it's coming from. And he was noticing it too. That's when I started really getting really worried that he was dangerous. But when he started abusing the cats and throwing them up in the air and breaking their legs and spinning them around when he was 10, I got him into therapy, but there was never really anything that was brought up back then about any, abuse that had happened to him. That didn't come out till he was in the state hospital. But his behavior when he was in school at 10 started changing dramatically.
And what was he doing?
He shot cows with guns.
That animal abuse is classic of kids that have a serious problem.
Yeah.
When did you start feeling threatened by him?
Oh, when I was pregnant with my second son.
And what happened?
Wow. So I was coming down the stairs from my bedroom, and Donovan had hidden himself underneath a dresser. And I came down the stairs, but I was midway down the stairs and I was pregnant, very pregnant. And he literally, I wasn't prone to holding on to rails, okay, because they were wide enough stairs and short enough stairway that, you know, coming down the stairs, it was pretty easy to go up and down a set of stairs. But I was in the middle of the stairway, and he scared me so badly, and I was halfway down the stairs that I thought I was going to fall down the stairs and literally miscarry. It was that scary. And I grabbed
What did he do?
He jumped out. He made this really weird sound, and I didn't identify it. It was like a growling sound. And then he came out like he slithered out from underneath the dresser. This isn't funny, but that's what it was, because I saw it out of the corner of my eye. Because the dresser in the living room, it was not a dresser, but like a coffee table that was raised up. And he came out from underneath it, but I saw it out of the corner of my eye, but I didn't know it was him because it was outside of my peripheral vision, sort of. And then he jumped out and he just scared the crap out of me. And
now, were there other such incidents that happened that kept increasing in intensity?
Yeah.
And I've been studying, just as I'm studying at the moment, the Jinn phenomenon, because it explains a lot of things, and it explains as well it explains partly at least the intrusive voice phenomenon, also alien abductions and things like that. And the Jinn, they hate children, they hate happiness, they hate intelligence. And Jerry was saying the same thing.
Same thing with the
voices.
Oh, and there was, you know, and I'll tell you, hindsight being 2020, after everything is said and done, I have ripped my life apart into a million pieces and peeled back the onion skin to, as a mom, what did I do wrong? It's not about what I did wrong. It's about what happened that I wasn't paying attention to, that were signs that I could have understood more. And as a mom, certain things just become routine and the same all the time. And being a young mother, I'm not using that as an excuse. That's just how it is. You don't think about these things. You just don't. And when the one thing I remember about that event with the stairs with me being pregnant was that ugly guttural voice that sounded like an animal, not like a bear, not like a bobcat, not like a cougar, but maybe a combination of it was just this guttural, unknown sound, because I lived on a ranch. I knew these sounds. This wasn't like that. And the way Donovan slithered, and I say slithered because it was not a very big space, underneath the coffee table. And he was about 10 at this time when everything really started changing with his behavior. But, we lived on the farm. I wasn't home a lot. He was getting my attention, and here I am pregnant, and I'm going to have another child. And that really bothered him at first. It really did. He told me it bothered him.
Yeah. And what other incidents did he progress into? What other, as time went on, what other incidents happened that scared you in his behavior?
Well, he started getting violent with me. He never, ever touched me, but he would throw his fist at me, and he would put holes in the wall. I'd be standing, and he would, and he started yelling. He started getting really angry. He was angry about everything. And life was not easy for us. This husband I was with ended up in a horrible divorce. My children got kidnapped and taken to South America, and Donovan got abandoned by this man he thought was his father. So there was a lot of events that were participating external forces we had no control over, but at the same time, it was trauma for all of us.
Because when you see the work as well of Eve Logan, those entities, they absolutely hate families, and you
Yes.
see it on the macroscopic level, where the governments that are controlled by those entities are trying to destroy the family circle, and at the individual level, when people are attacked by those entities, either directly or through somebody that's possessed by those entities, the family more or less always gets destroyed. I mean, I've had cases with people I've known, and they've had schizophrenic people in their families. The family flew apart. Big families flew apart.
That's exactly right. The voices go after the families. They go after the girlfriends. They go after the wives. They tell the patient that their wives are cheating on them, that they can't be trusted. They go after the family. They want the family destroyed. They don't want any close relationships. They don't want the person to be happy. They want them to be isolated and by themselves. And if you look at what the deep state is doing with this bullcrap pandemic of yours, they're doing the same thing. It's the same patterns that the voices run, that the deep state is running with this pandemic bullcrap. You know,
Yeah,
all the same patterns right down the line.
Yeah. And then as he got older, and then finally when he was 17, and we were both going to college. I got him involved in college, and he was an English major studying for his law degree. I was going to college at the time, to university, and and so we would go to university together, and it was really cool. But then he got involved in crack, and then he started getting involved in selling it. And I would come home, and I noticed he wasn't on campus, and I would come home for lunch, because our thing was coming home for lunch together and then driving back over to the university together. And, this was our thing for a while. And then I would come home, and he had people in my house, and he was living with me. And it was like, no, this is not acceptable. You're not, if you either get a job or you go to school. And then he started getting involved with very, very bad people. They were just creepy, and I didn't want them in my house. And I said no. So then I started getting freaking out. So I changed the locks. I told Donovan he had two choices: either get a job or leave. And then he got super violent with me. He never hit me, but he did put another hole in the wall. And it was like, okay, I'm not putting up with your violence anymore. We're done here. And he left, and that was the last time he ever lived with me until he got pregnant with his wife. At that particular time, they got pregnant, and then I let him live with me till the child was born, and then he moved out. But I will tell you that period of time was the most god-awful, and I never know if I came home from college late at night at 8 o'clock after being in class all day long, what I was going to find at home. The paranoia of the fear of who was in my house became just, and that's what it's like when you live with somebody. And he was off the meds at this particular time. And it was that living in fear of the unknowing of what he was going to do, where his head was at, what the voices were telling him, where the violence was going to go, which was so scary. It was just scary.
Did he ever talk to you about the voices, or did he try to keep those to himself?
Oh, no. He was very open with me. That's the thing about being a young mother and having a child at a young age. You get a sibling relationship.
So what did he tell you about the voices at that time?
He would just tell me that's what they're telling me. That's what they're always the other beings. What did he tell you they were telling you? Him.
It's not what he said, Jerry, as much as what he did.
And he said the voices were telling him to do those things.
Well, by the time he was 18, 19, those voices became the monster. And that's when he started writing his poetry, because I asked him if he would start writing. And he started.
Do you still have that poem, the monster poem?
I do.
Can you read it?
I can. Let me get it.
So this is a poem he wrote about his voices.
So he was actually totally conscious about the presence of the voices.
Yes.
And did he realize, did he think the voices were chemical reactions, or did he realize that they were something external at one time, or did he think they came from him?
I think this poem would answer that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do want to talk about that, but yes, there is a I'm going to tell you, that's a good question, Paul, and I do want to address that because it's twofold. Again, it's actions over words, but it's about how he just kind of embraced the monster because it became living on the streets, a survival instinct, and gave him power and scared people, and he thrived on that. If that answers your question. And I got to use, because Donovan's writing is very hard to read sometimes, so I got to use a magnifying glass. Okay, so let me see. This poem was written somewhere between 2003 and 2006-ish. Okay.
So it kind of gives you a snapshot of what was going on in his head at the time,
yeah.
His relationship with the monster, which were the voices.
Yeah, and he was in jail at the time, and this would have put him at about 22, I think, or 3 years old at this time. I'd have to do the math. So this is called There is a Monster. So this is what he wrote. There is a monster that lives in my head. This monster is real. It's not under my bed. My monster tells me things to do. It tells me sometimes when the news is new. My monster is crying as it spent all the years drowning out my courage and disposing my fears. My monster is strong. That's what I like to think. My monster is coming when it's time to drink. My monster is ready. My monster is strong. What will I do when my monster is gone? My monster will never leave. That is his plan. It overwhelms me when I'm making a stand. There is a monster inside me. I thought I was strong. How could this be? My monster has a name too. He walks in the dark whispering Yazoo. My monster's watching me. He won't tell you my name. My monster is the shadows you cannot see. His heart is heavy. He plays for the game. My monster is awake. He wants to be monster. He's as blood from a lake. His bond is with me now, monster. He has nothing else to do. My monster is awake. I swear every time I read that, I learn something new about Donovan every time.
Are there any other poems that kind of encapsulate kind of what he was, the voices and what he was feeling at the time, what was going on in his head?
But even with the name Yazoo, it sounds like ancient demonic names, ancient Hebrew or Sumerian or something. It's the name Yazoo. It sounds like even ancient demons, and even the name, it's something about the name he uses shows that it's something external.
Yeah, and he was very clear on that. Let's see. Let me find. Here's a good one. It's called What's That Sound? It's a little long, but let's read it. It's a good one. So this one's called, and it was written about the same time, and he's got a number, but this one's is like number 18, and it was in that period of time, and he signed his poems. So I'll read this one. This one is interesting. I read this one just the other night, and I thought this is the one I wanted to read to you the other day, Jerry, and I never had a chance to. Okay, so maybe I don't need this. Okay, so this one is weird. It's creepy, kind of. It is creepy. Can you hear that? Does it wake you from sleep? I hear it all day. Find all through, I hear it all day and all through the night. What's that sound that I can hear? Can you hear it too? It calls out my name. It cries for my help. It wants me to go. I lay so afraid with nothing to show. There it is again. Did you hear that? Whispering in the dark, saying something I don't know. It's closer this time. Nowhere to hide. Everything's so cold. I can hear the voice now. Hold on. I can hear the voice now. It's shrill and without light. It's calling my name. It breathes by my side. I stay so silent to pretend I'm asleep. The voice comes so loud. The thoughts so violent. This voice is calling. What do I do? How do I try to sleep, ignoring my fear? Or do I face the voice from the deep? I can hear that. Do you hear it too? How do you know that it's not coming for you? Do you have something special to show? What's that sound that stifles my dreams, that wakens me to scream? Do you hear it? It's calling your name. It says you're to be next on its hall of fame. It whispers your fantasies. It plays a game. It makes you cry for something you say. Do you hear that? It calls you to come. Listen closer. It has something to say. Cloud your judgment and go run away. Doing all the things and not giving a fuck. It tells you to do it. Don't worry, my friends. When you die, you will have time for amends. Do you hear it? I cannot, for it speaks in my rhyme. What's that sound? You will hear it in time.
Okay, so you just got a snapshot into the mind of a psychotic killer.
And you know, Paul, I got to tell you, Jerry knows this. 5 years or so before Donovan murdered his girlfriend, he actually wrote a poem about it. It was frightening when I put 2 and 2 together after the fact. When
So
Jerry went,
you got that one?
I can find it. Okay. If you guys want to carry on a conversation, I got to go hunt for it, but give me a sec.
Because it seems that the entities can actually tell the future more or less, because if they're beyond space and time, they can tell the future.
That's exactly right. They're not of the physical universe. They're of the energetic universe. In the energetic universe, there is no space, there is no time, there is no sequencing, there is no matter. So it operates by totally different rules than the physical universe, you know, and thoughts are energetic, you know, and these entities are energetic. And it doesn't work to drown the brain with drugs because it doesn't touch the energetic part of this malady. You know, they're diluted what they're doing. They're totally freaking diluted.
Yeah, I found it. And what was that and I think sometimes, and Jerry understands me well enough to know this, and I have to be honest with you, which is why I wore the color yellow today, because I wanted to put a lot of positive energy into my solar plexus, because sometimes these things make me upset, because these are things that, again, when Donovan had schizophrenic, that I swept under the rug, and I had these poems, but you just don't know the impact until something so tragic as what Donovan did to his girlfriend comes up, and you have to deal with it. You either deal with it or you don't. And I chose to deal with it. And so it forced me to do a lot of deep diving and go through things. And Jerry had, told me to put the book together for the poems so that I'd have something to pull on, which I did. And so this is the poem that he wrote. This actually has a date on it. Hold on, let me go find the date. And these are written in pencil because he was in prison at the time. This was written on 8/30/2005, and this was poem number 29 in this series of poems that he wrote. So did I say 2005 or 9? 2005. August 30th of 2005 was when this particular poem was written, and he murdered his girlfriend on April 24th, 25th-ish of 2020. So
now he killed what, 2 or 3 other people prior to that? 4. So 4 plus his girlfriend, which he cut to pieces, is 5.
Yes.
And they still haven't found her body, right?
No. And he had her body at the time that he came here. From the time that he murdered her in April of 2020, during when the pandemic was first happening, and it was very bad in Denver. They had just closed everything down and nobody knew how to function, as we all know, to June 5th, 6th, when he showed up at my house. He had possession of her body for 43 days at that particular time. Yeah.
Oh, tragic.
Yeah.
And he killed 5 people in 2020, or was it?
No, the first time he went to prison, he actually got in a gunfight and shot people over drugs and guns, selling guns and drugs in Denver. And he got put in the state hospital over that for 8 years because he had been on meth again for like a 15-day time frame when this gunfight happened and innocent people got killed. And so then when he was able to testify and find other witnesses, he served another 7-8 years and off and on. And then there were other charges, but he actually got off for a 15-year term after murdering 4 people. He got lost in the system bad. I am not kidding you. There's so much I could talk about the system when it comes to my son. He should have never been ever let out of prison in the first place. But that's our system. It's such a failure.
It's a failure. Total failure.
It's a total failure. And Donovan was one of those people that just, even with all of the evidence that he had, there should have still been some mental health or something that could have happened, but they just put him on the streets with 2 weeks of meds, and off he went to gallop off on to do more evil in the world, if you will.
And that's what they do. When I was working in the ER for several major hospitals here, they'll put them in, they'll hospitalize them for a week or until their insurance runs out. They'll drug them up, give them a few days worth of meds, turn them loose, and they can come back in again in a couple of weeks. It's this merry-go-round where they're just sucking these people dry and the insurance companies dry of every penny they can get out of them, and just drugging their brains, grogging them out for a while, and then no more money. They end up in prison. Mm-hmm. It's a totally insane, broken system. It's nuts.
It's a circle. It just goes.
It's a big circle. It's a money fleecing circle.
Yeah.
And big pharma and psychiatry are making a fortune.
Yeah.
It's like that in France. I mean, there's been doctors who've been put in prison in France and Belgium for saving people's lives because they've treated cancer through non-conventional means, and they've died in prison. They've had long prison sentences. And on the other extreme, somebody who's a murderer, for example, in France, if they get 20 years, they can be out within 10 years for good behavior. So there's it's a totally mad system. Also, I think it's in most countries, sadly.
Yeah, most Western countries. Yeah, and it's crazy. It's just insane what they're doing. And big pharma and psychiatry are making a fortune out of this, and they're not doing people any good. All they're doing is drugging them up, and they turn them into zombies. That's it. They're not curing anything. They don't want to cure anything. They've reduced the funding for schizophrenia research to a mere pittance. It's virtually not going on. They don't want to find a cure. We have one. They don't want to. They don't want it out. They don't want it to get out.
Yeah, that's true. So here's the poem, you guys. This one is really intense, and this one even kind of threw Jerry and Mark for a loop. Okay, so but it definitely threw me for a loop. Okay, bear with me because the pencil is very light. I have some questions to ask you, sir. Did you kill your children's mother? Ma'am, no ma'am, I did not kill their mother. You must be thinking of someone other, because I did not hit her with a bat. I did not hit her with this or that. And that's a fact, ma'am, no ma'am. I did not, would not attack my love, did not, could not hide a bloody glove, ma'am, no ma'am. I did not catch her cheating, and did not, would not ambush while they were eating, ma'am, no ma'am. I did not stab her 20 times. She was already living that when I came to find. She was already like that when I came to find, ma'am, no ma'am. I did not hit her with the clock. I did not, could not put her in a box. And even though she was dead, I did not, could not chop off her head, ma'am, no ma'am. And to the jury, you must not convict, because lovely, looky here, this glove does not fit, ma'am, no ma'am.
That's chilling.
It's he predicted what he did. Well, the entity predicted what he did years and years before.
That was like 15 years before.
That's chilling.
That's really.
Goosebumps. I'm just covered in goosebumps right now. It is. It's so scary to know what these entities, and that's the thing, in the realm of space that they live in the realm of space that they live in, where there's darkness, and it's in they're evil entities, and they live in what I believe is the fourth dimension, which is a dimension that they cannot get out of. There's more and more studies coming out that shows that it's like purgatory. What the church believes is purgatory. That's where the entities in my belief system, I believe, reside, because they can't get out. And here Donovan, he has this attachment on him, this grossly attached entity that is on him, in him, on him, you see. And nobody can tell me as mom, and even listening to this now, that this is not real, that the voices are not real, because I will personally tell you that you're full of shit. I'm sorry.
But I'll join that. They're very real. They're very dangerous, and they're always negative.
And that doesn't mean that all of them, with all people that have schizophrenia, are to the degree, again, that my son is at.
No, but this is where we'll end up.
Yes.
With, either here or in prison. And the prison is full of these kind of people who are listening to voices, and they just lock them up. And half the time they don't even give them any psychotic drugs unless they're causing problems. So yeah. Jinean, when did you get word that he had killed somebody, killed his wife? And what was your reaction, or how did that come about? And he cut her into little pieces, right?
Yes. So, okay. So he was in jail in 2019, and he was in jail for abuse of his girlfriend. And he asked me if I would go into his computer and get in touch with his lawyer, because it was in self-defense. And I'm a paralegal by trade. I was able to go in and find the evidence that he was asking me to get through his emails. And I got the photographs and everything, and I sent them to his public defender. And he was out of jail on, instead of facing 2 years, he got out on probation for 2 years instead, because it could be shown that it was self-defense. She stabbed him first. He had photographs of that, and then he defended himself by pushing her up against a wall, okay, and keeping her from doing any more damage to him. But this, again, we're talking about a toxic couple who is invested in drugs and constantly high. So it didn't matter. It was you know, hindsight being 20/20, Jerry and Paul, I'm telling you right now, if I would have known the outcome of this, I would have never stepped in. I would have never stepped in. I wish I wouldn't have. I don't live with regrets, but as a mom at that particular time, not knowing COVID was on the, you know, horizon, not knowing any of this, I would have never done what I did, but I did. And there's nothing I can do to turn back the hands of time. Okay. So I got my son out on a 2-year probation, and then COVID hit, and then he was homeless. Okay. They put him out on the streets from jail, from county jail, with 2 weeks of meds, and he couldn't get into Denver General Hospital to get his meds. There was the backup of people standing on the streets, and he wasn't going to stand. And honestly, Donovan wasn't in a place where he really wanted him anyway, because they just made him into a zombie. And now he's on the streets, living on the streets. COVID now has happened. Everything is in lockdown, and everybody's lives have changed. Then I find out he moved in with a woman by the name of Denise. He told me on the phone. And I was on the phone with him all the time, walking the streets while I'm doing my work. I'm listening, because one of the things as a mom of a schizophrenic is you work with your children in talk therapy, and you listen. And Donovan was never really prone to telling the truth after so many years. And so you have to listen to the messages that come through to try to decipher and use discernment about what's really going on with him. And then I realized, because I also had control of his bank account, because of his, you know, drug use and things. And so I was helping him with his finances, making sure he wasn't overspending his money. And then I started noticing a pattern of him going to where I believed that she lived. And then we didn't talk for about 3 weeks, because I told him, I said, if you move in with her and I find out about it, I have to sever ties with you. I can't help you anymore. I warned you, please stay away from her. One of you are going to end up killing each other. It's just going to happen. You guys have such a toxic relationship. And so this Denise was not Denise. It was actually Allie. And
that
so
was his that was his wife or his real girlfriend. He just changed his name.
Girlfriend. Yeah, not his wife. He was still married, and he'd been with his girlfriend for basically 10 years, living together. And off and on, I should say. They didn't really have much of, it was a drug-induced relationship, and a very toxic one at that. So she had him move in with her in her apartment, and then on the 26th, his birthday happened. His birthday is April 24th. And he didn't pick up the phone when I called him. And I knew he was with her. And then I went to bed that night. It was about 8 o'clock at night. And I had this intense, and this is what happens as a mom. There's certain psychic things that happen as a mom when we all have that intuition. I was told, you know, this intuition was telling me, please go call the police. There's something wrong. So I called the Arvada Police Department on the 24th of April at about 8 o'clock at night. And I said, there's something wrong. I need you guys to do a wellness check on, you know, Allie, there's something wrong. I felt it. I knew it. I can't explain to you what it was, but it was on his birthday. And then I went back to bed. I followed my intuition. I made the phone call. And the next morning on the 25th, when I woke up, I got a voicemail back from the Arvada Police Department. It said, well, we went to the address that you changed. And keep in mind, she had just been arrested in January. And so they had her new address, but they didn't go. And I told them, the police, I said, this may not be the right address because I don't have her new address. But that you do, she was arrested. This is when she was arrested. Please go to the second apartment if you don't find her at the address that I'm giving you. But they never did that. Now, I firmly believe that she was murdered on his birthday. I believe Donovan murdered her on his birthday. And when I got the phone call back on the 25th, and this is hindsight. Now, this wasn't at the time. But on the 25th, when I got the message back, the Arvada Police Department basically said, hey, we went to this address, and if you're just probably worried, they probably are just hunkering down, it's COVID. I wouldn't put too much value in it. Don't worry about it. They'll probably be okay. But you don't understand. I'm in my head, I'm going, no, this is not okay. And then on the 26th, I was going hiking with a girlfriend, and I got a phone call from Donovan. And this was not unusual for him to interrupt my hiking. He just does this, you know, he can be annoying that way. And he called me on the morning of the 25th at 5 o'clock in the morning. And he said, "Hey, Mom, I'm just checking in with you." But there was something different in his voice. Allie wasn't in the background calling me names. That was the first thing I noticed. She wasn't saying, "What are you doing? Calling your mom?" You know, because that's what she did. And there was no Allie. And then the second warning red flag for me was, I said, "Well, I don't hear Allie in the background." He said, "Oh, she's with a boyfriend and she left her phone with me. She trusts me now and we're good. Everything is good." But there was a certain amount of peace in Donovan's voice that triggered a big guttural red flag for me. And I said, "Listen, I'm going hiking. I need you to not call me. I don't want to talk to you. I'm going hiking. Leave me alone. I'll call you when I get home later." But no phone call happened on the 26th. On the morning of the 27th is when Donovan, he had called me twice. And then later on about 10:30, he said, "Mom, I need to talk to you. I need to know I can trust you. I've done something really bad. And I need to talk to you, but I need to know that you're not going to tell anybody about it." And I said, "Well, Donovan, you know, and this is me. This is Mom. This is how I talked with him. Donovan, there isn't possibly anything that you could do that's so bad that we can't work through it. That's what I do with Donovan. There isn't possibly anything." And then as the longer that phone call went on before he admitted to me that he had stabbed her 15 times and what he was about ready to do to her, I had to mute myself because by now I'm shaking so badly. I can't, I'm losing my breath. I'm sitting at my dining room table and I don't, and I know, and I wanted to record the call, but I knew that if I went into that recording phase, Donovan would hear it and he would know I'm recording and he would hang the phone up. I was faced with a dilemma that I could not even begin to tell you what I was faced with at that very moment. And then throughout the day, there were phone calls, and then he told me more about what he was getting ready to do to her body. And then he told me she was swollen, she was expanding on the bed, and she had gotten 3 times the size of what she was, and she was in a fetal position. And I said, "Please, Donovan, I'm begging you, please, I'm begging you, please call the police. Don't touch her. Just call the police. If it was self-defense, you can get some help. Please just don't do anything more. I'm begging you." But I was not saying it in this calm voice. I'm describing it to you right now. I was screaming, "Donovan, you know, please, I'm begging you. Don't touch her. Just leave her alone. Don't do anything." And then that's when on the phone, he carried her into the bathroom, into the tub. And then he said, "I gotta go. She's asking me to bathe her." And then the voices started coming out. And even right now, I'm just getting so nauseous even thinking about what happened after that. I don't know. But what I do know is that time passed, and how I found out what had happened was because of the news reports. And I had gotten a phone call because I had to retain a lawyer in Colorado to keep the media at bay on a situation, because I have other work that I do, and my lawyers that I work with currently helped me through that, and that's how I found out. He called me and said, "Have you seen the news reports?" And I said no, and he said, "Well, you better get online and you better read it fast, and then you call me back." And I did, and that's how I found out that there was decomp that was found in the refrigerator. There was decomp that was found in the freezer. There was a dead snake and dead rats and a dead dog, and there was blood spatter that had been covered up with paint, and they pulled up the floorboards and had found blood, and it just got worse and worse. And I read that and I collapsed. I was standing right where I'm at right now, and when I read those reports, I literally collapsed right here on the floor. And I don't know how long I was on the floor, but I just know that when I read that, I knew there was no going back. And the 27th was the last time I ever spoke to my son. To this day, I have not spoken to him other than when he was in court, when he pled guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. So that's basically the gist of the story. And then I did have a chance to talk with the investigator, which he has said to me, when I'm ready, they'll fly me to Denver and they'll go over the whole entire case and show me everything about their investigation and what they found and the heinousness of the crime. And I said, well, when I'm ready, and I appreciate that. And I will do that. I'm just not ready yet. But, you know, and he told me, you know, a little bit about what was going on and what they had discovered in that apartment. And yeah. And you want to hear the irony of this, you guys? Here's the irony of the story. And I still sometimes wonder, you know, reality. It's about reality, right? This apartment that Donovan was living in with his girlfriend at that time was an apartment he did apartment maintenance in. And he knew the play of that whole entire complex because he was an apartment maintenance manager, apartment maintenance caretaker, facilitator at this exact apartment complex that he performed this murder in.
Now, Jinean, you said at one time he came back and you felt he was going to try to kill you.
Yeah, he drove
can you tell us about that? Was that before or after this happened?
No, so in June when the eviction notice came out, because I did call the apartment manager. This is what on June 6th at about 8 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from Donovan, and I didn't answer the phone because my lawyer said do not talk to him. So I didn't. And let me tell you, that was not easy because I'm a mom. I want to know what's going on, but I knew I can't. I just knew I can't. I knew whatever he had done was very evil and very wrong and very, very, very bad. And so he called me and then he texted me and he said, I need to talk to you. Please call me back. Well, I have a fenced in 2-acre plot of land and I have dogs. And he had pulled in my front gate and had backed in with his vehicle because I could see out of my bedroom window where he was at, but I didn't know it was him. I only knew it was him because of his voice, because he had hidden himself between the gate and the side of the fence, and he had something hanging. He had something hanging from the side of his arm. His arm was down, and he had the hatchback of his SUV that was up, but it was planted flat back. The front of his vehicle was pointed towards the street, and the back of his truck was up against the fence, and the hatchback was up. Now, my dogs they smelled, they knew they wouldn't let him in, and he knew the names of the dogs, and I heard his voice, and I immediately called 911, and I'm running through the house, tippy-toeing, locking my doors, my front door, locking everything, because if he gets through that gate, I knew I'm a goner. I don't know what. I can't explain to you how I knew. I just knew if that kid gets through that gate, I'm dead. That's the only thing I knew. And that's what I knew. So I called the sheriff because the police aren't out here. I called the sheriff, and the sheriff, by the time the sheriff got here, Donovan had already pulled out. It took him about 15 minutes to get here. And they could not find his vehicle. I called my roommate. I told her what was going on, and she saw his pickup truck. She calls the police, and there was this frenzy of vehicles looking for him. And I'm on a border of 2 counties. So if he crossed over county line, there would have been nothing that this particular county could have done. They would have had to call the other county in. So I don't know if he was bebopping back and forth in counties. I don't know. But throughout the day, then he ended up in Globe, Arizona. And then 2 days later, the detectives are here. They got arrested. Were able through my roommate to help get him arrested. Because by now I'm a complete basket case. I'm not speaking full sentences. I'm a complete wreck. I'm just dealing with trying to just breathe and function and walk from one room to the other without collapsing like a piece of spaghetti over this. And so what ended up happening was when all of that went down, what can I say? He did not physically attack me, but There was something in his hand. I don't know what that was, but I know that if I would have went out there, in his mind, this is what I think, but I can't be sure. I think Donovan was wanting me to come out and embrace him and say, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you." That ain't happening. I couldn't, because I don't know what has happened, but for him to drive in 13 hours from Denver to Tucson, Arizona, he was going super fast. Okay. He got here within, and what I found out when he was here, when I called the apartment complex, now keep in mind, while he was out there, okay, I'm on the phone. Do not ask me where this energy came from. Do not ask me how I knew what to do. I don't know, but what I do know is I got in his bank account. I saw he had gotten some cash when he left Denver, and I started tracing where he had been buying cigarettes from, and then I clicked on that gas station and I saw it, and then I saw that apartment complex, and I knew instantly that's where he was living, because he had bought cigarettes there before, and I put two and two together that that's the apartment building he used to manage. I immediately called on the sign above. I called the phone number and I asked for the manager. He answered the phone and I said, "I need a wellness check on, do you have a tenant that lives there by the name of Alicia Banks Newton?" That's her name. It's public. I'm not telling you anything that isn't being said. He said, "I can't give you that information." I said, "Is she in her 30s and was she born in November?" Okay. He said, "We do have somebody that does have that, you know." And I said, "Listen to me. I believe she's been murdered. Please tell me what I need to do to get a wellness check." He said, "Oh, ma'am, I cannot do that if that's the case." He said, "They just posted an eviction notice and we walked through the property and we noticed today that the eviction notice had been ripped off the front door." So what happened was, obviously Donovan had not paid rent, or nobody had paid rent for 3 months. Okay, that's basically what it meant. And so the eviction notice was posted off. The management knew that. And he said, "I need you to call the police, and they have to be the ones that have to go in. If you tell me," I said, "which police department do I call?" And he said, "You can either call Jefferson County Police Department or Arvada." I called the Arvada Police Department because it was closer. So the Arvada Police Department was there within 10 minutes. This is while Donovan is out there. This happened while he was out there. I made this phone call. The police came in. I texted my lawyer, and I'm waiting for the police, the sheriff, to get here. And then that's how that they got into Donovan's, or into Allie's apartment, because Donovan wasn't on the lease, and they saw, and that's when it hit the news. And on the 28th, or it was either the 28th or the 29th, is when my lawyer said, "You need to go take a look if you haven't seen the media, it's all over Denver news right now." So, you know, and the police didn't even have the courtesy. Here's where this is where it gets really bad for me. The police didn't even have the courtesy to call me and say to me, "Jinean, we're so sorry. Jinean, we should have listened to you, Jinean." It happened after the fact, when they're sitting in my living room. But at that moment, when I said, "Please do the wellness check on the 24th, they would have at least had a body, or she would have been alive. What do you do when the system fails you like that?
So it was a dysfunction at every level of the system. Not only entities, but the whole system that dysfunctioned everywhere.
Yeah. It was the most awfulest thing I've ever experienced. And I cannot even begin to tell you what it's like when you know your son is mentally ill and you know he's been on meth. I didn't know for how many days. I knew he was on and off of it, but I didn't know to the extent till after the investigation was done. And, you know, the Detective Bruner, you know, let me know about it. But I will tell you this. From the time I made that phone call, and and here's another part of the details that's really important for everybody to understand. On the 16th of April, I literally called his probation officer and his lawyer, and I said, "Donovan is living with her." Now, by now, COVID is full blown all over the country. Everything's in lockdown on April 16th. Nobody knows how to function. And his probation officer said, "There's nothing we can do." There's nothing we can do. You have the right to, file a complaint. You have a right, but I don't have authority to talk to you. There's nothing we can do. This was on the 16th when I knew for sure that he had moved in and he was in violation of probation. And when I called his lawyer, and so the 24th happened, the 25th happened, the 26th and 27th happened, and I had my lawyer involved. My lawyer called their lawyer, Donovan's lawyer, and said, there is something that's happened that I believe that my client is telling the truth. You need to hear her story. I spoke with the public defender supervisor and the lawyer, and they said that they were going to do a wellness check, and they never went and did a wellness check on the 26th or the 27th when I found out, when Donovan told me he stabbed his girlfriend 15 times. They did not believe me. They did not believe me. So they dropped the ball. His own lawyer. And everybody had ample time. I don't care whether, let's say, for example, you guys, that there would have been something that it would have been a total farce. And yeah, there's a lot of people who went through a lot of stuff in 2020. I would never wish what happened to me on anybody, but everybody has their story. This one is worse, but it's not even worse in comparison to a lot of people dying. It's relative to everybody's individual life. I can't say that my situation is any worse than anybody else's with what happened in 2020. I will stand here and say that and stand firmly on that. And yet, at the same time, nobody in this world knew how to function, but there was no reason for them not, because the laws were being broken. What did COVID give the right for the laws? It's okay to break the laws and not do anything about it. And had I been a crazy woman, had I been somebody who did not understand the psychological impact of my son's schizophrenia and what he is capable of doing, I was not going to be one of those moms that are like going to call the police just for attention. I was calling because I knew in my gut something was wrong, and I never ever got the law involved unless I knew something was wrong. And my reputation just on that level alone stands firm with my son's crimes that he's committed over the course of his lifetime. I wasn't going to go out there and just raise some kind of cane and just tell some sort of farce like that. Who does that? Well, there are parents out there that do that. And even when the police were here sitting in my living room and the detectives came here, they said, some parents were just calling because they were worried about their kids. We had to categorize everything. But sometimes categorization doesn't work. What if you do have a real story like what happened with mine and the ball gets dropped everywhere? Then what? And that's not only just about the schizophrenia part and the voices and all of the things that go around this incredibly heinous crime. It's the fact that the system is so broken that even when people are telling the truth, nobody goes out there and does anything about it. Even when they have the truth right there. And then hindsight being 2020, well, if we would have been there and we would have been the ones that went on that, we would have went to the second apartment. Well, that didn't happen. There's no body now. Then what? What do you do? And I will fight for that. I will fight for the right of knowing that what had happened with Donovan and the voices and all of that. Schizophrenia is very real. The voices are very real, and bad things when the voices come. And in a stressful situation, when you're being impacted and you're being isolated, and he's already used to being isolated with these voices for being in jail. This was the big potion pot, for lack of a better way, to the cauldron of boiling, of setting up an environment for anybody who has schizophrenia, for the schizophrenia to become worse with anybody that has voices in that period of time and still and current. And my love for all of these people and my compassion for anyone who has schizophrenia, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. I'm really sorry, because this isn't fair to people who even don't have schizophrenia. But can you imagine having voices that are external and in a world that is so chaotic right now, and all these people that need so much love and so much help and so much compassion, and there's nothing there except a pill, and the pill isn't doing anything for them? Can you imagine what these people are going through? And that's why I love Jerry so much, because Jerry's voice is so strong. Jerry's voice is so real, and he's so out there. And I am so honored, Jerry, to work with you. I'm so honored to be here with you. I'm so honored to be able to be a mom and a voice and a family member of anybody who is going through this. And Paul, I really am so grateful to be on your show. And I'm so grateful to be here to be able to express this, because if there's anything I can tell any of you, you're not alone.
Because basically nobody talks about that, and that's before we'll end on a positive note. But before that, I'd like to say that the entity phenomenon is real, and what's sickening, it's the scientific and medical community that totally negates it, basically.
And even the legal community.
And
even the legal community.
Of course, they don't, they totally negate it. But what's also wrong is the alternative community, the New Age movement and the religious movements. When you talk about entities, well, it's nothing. You just do a little prayer and the entity goes. They're nothing. They're not very strong, and all that. Well, it's not like that. Entities are present. Mm-hmm. They're extremely strong, and they destroy, as your son's story shows. They destroy, and the most important thing and the first thing to do is to be informed about it, to inform medical professionals, law professionals, priests, even the spiritual, the alternative community, about the reality of those entities. And that's why Jerry's work and your work, the way you talk about your experience without any fear, that's the most important, because people have to have that information to do something about it.
Yes. And one of the things I want to add a little humor to this, because none of whoever is listening to this, when we were getting ready to have this call, my microphone or nothing, I could hear, I couldn't hear Jerry or Paul. My microphone went crazy. I had to reboot my computer, and it's inevitable when we have such strong messages out there, how these entities can come in and really disrupt the communication of the messages, because they don't want these messages by Jerry, by me, by Sherry, and anyone else who is on Jerry's team. They don't want us to be able to share this information with others. And as this is going on, I am so convinced how powerful this message is. And the more that I do this work and the more that I understand where this is going, and just being so grateful to be in this position with Jerry and and Sherry especially, and with you, Paul, and getting this out there, how important this is. And I can only hope that whoever's listening, share this with anybody who has schizophrenia. Share this with anybody that needs help, that they say that the voices aren't real, because they are very real, and they attach themselves and they don't go away. And medicine is not going to make them go away.
That's exactly right.
Medicine.
And my final word would be, I've worked in the mental health system for 35, 40 years. I've worked in prisons. I've worked in the emergency rooms. I've worked in state hospitals. I've worked in private psychiatric hospitals. I've worked in mental health. I've done the whole gamut. And the whole time I've been asking patients about their voices, what they say, what they do, how they act. And I'll tell you straight up, what they're teaching in the universities, what psychiatry is pushing, what the pharmaceutical industry is pushing, is pure, raw bullshit. It's bullshit. The voices are very real. They're energetic entities. They take control of these people, and you see what the end result is with their current mental health system and the prison system the way it is. It is doing nothing to help these people. It's not doing anything to help society. It's a crop of crap, the whole system, period.
And to join Jerry in that, and when the legal community doesn't even know how to embrace a thought process of what a mother or a parent or a family member has to say about something that is going on with somebody who is schizophrenic, that is about ready to commit a crime or has committed a crime, and they don't believe them, is also part of a systemic breakdown. We have all got to stand together, and we've all got to push for some sort of change in this environment that we're currently in, because pharma doesn't work. The voices are real, and neither is the legal system. The legal system is just as broken as the medical community is on this.
And just to finish with this, Jinean, when we speak to you, you're a very balanced person. You're a very we can see you're a very you're a person that's full of life, full of joy. And how do you do this? How did you do not to fall? Because what you've lived through is the worst experience a parent can live through, a human can live through. And how do you do to keep positive, to keep balanced, to keep happy, although there's those terrible circumstances? How do you do it? Because it's very, very important that parents who are in that situation know what's your how do you do it, basically?
Day by day, collapse after collapse, emotion after motion, stomping my feet and screaming to God, asking why, traveling and letting my imagination run off to the depths of the ugliness of the blood, of witnessing in my mind what Donovan had done to, even though I wasn't present. But when your kid tells you something that he's about ready to do, and then you find out that he really did it, and then your brain just goes to these ugly, ugly places, and you go to the depths of the darkness of the dregs of the sewer, to the bottom of the sewer, to the level of the depths of the darkness that you could ever possibly go, if you can allow your mind to do that without losing it. And I could do that. I could do that because I lived with Donovan's schizophrenia for years. You have to tear down every ounce of blame that you can possibly do yourself. And you have to continuously find out what the real reason is behind all of this happening. And only then, if you are willing to go to the darkness and travel on that pathway and go to the depths of the dregs and fully understand the feelings and process through all of the feelings and all of the emotions that we have as parents, as loved ones of somebody who does these kinds of things, and you get through this. And then the answer finally comes. And for me, it came about 18 months later. And this was even after I even got in touch with Jerry. I realized that and I already do a lot of work with people. I realized that the work I have in store for me is even greater than what I ever imagined. And I had to go through this to be able to help the people who have been traumatized by this whole event, and even worse, and be a voice for them to let them know they are not alone. And there isn't anything possibly even worse than what they could go through. And it could be even worse, but it's all relative to their situation. But I can be that person and that voice. And day by day, when I came to that understanding that this happened to me because I could be that person, and I said yes to the universe, I said yes to God. If this is where you want me, I accept the work that you're going to hand down to me. I accept it. I will walk with you, guide me, lead me, take me to those places, whatever it is, but get me through this sadness and this grief. Then I got pneumonia. I got through the grief, and day by day, I got better. And I had people all over the country. I had shamans, I had healers working on me with, machines, and just helping me with my grief day by day, because there was a point in time where I was so sick. I was going to die. I just knew I was going to die. I was so sick I was sick with the flu. I got double lung pneumonia. And it wasn't COVID related, but I got really sick, and I had my animals and my dogs and my chicken, and I could get some air, and the sun would come in, and I would breathe, and I just took each day, little tiny, I'm talking little bitty baby steps, tiny baby steps, until I could take a giant leap. And I was able to get through it. But the one thing for anybody who goes through this kind of trauma, and it doesn't matter even whether it's this kind of trauma or not, feel it, let it come through you, and it's temporary, and temporary is sometimes even harder than long-term. But if you can just let the feelings come through you, and you can just allow them and sit with them and embrace them and love them and say, I don't like the way you make me feel. I don't like the way this feels. I don't want to. And it's okay if you take a break from the not wanting to feel, because sometimes the feelings are so incredibly hard to get through. Sometimes you got to let it come through day after day until you can just get through it.
But if you resist, it persists.
Yes,
if you resist exactly. it will persist.
Yes. And if you allow it and you get through it, then you will begin to heal your soul, because this is a soul energy. This is a soul trauma. This is a soul energy, that tragedy that we have to heal. It affects us physically, but it is a soulful tragedy and injury that we have. If we're going to get through any kind of trauma, if we don't process through those feelings, we'll never get through them. And we have to be very real with ourselves. And
do you want to tell them about your group before we sign off here?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Jerry, for reminding me. So Jerry and Sherry and I started a Facebook group, and it's called Moms of Schizophrenics. If you just put Moms of Schizophrenics, it'll show up. Let us know that you saw or listened to this podcast and show with Paul. And there's like 3 questions to answer if you have a family member. And we're letting it organically grow, because we know that this is so scary for some people to even admit that they have schizophrenia or have a family member with schizophrenia. It's a very safe place to have these discussions. We're working on a larger platform. We're getting more people involved. Please come and join the Facebook group.
How do they find it? What's the address?
So it's just type in Facebook in the search engine in Facebook, moms and family members with schizophrenia, moms and family members with schizophrenia. And you'll see a picture of Jerry and Sherry and me in the headline, and you just go click on that, and it's right there. And Paul, what I can do is I can send you an email or a text, and with that Facebook address that you can put in the link.
Yeah, I'll send you my personal email right now.
Okay. And I'll get you that link, and and I know you've got Jerry's email address, but we're putting out content and doing small. Thank you. I'll write that down right now.
Okay, and if you want to know more about the voices, we wrote a book about them that will wake you up. I mean, this is how we discovered them. This is how we found them. This is what the medical system failure is all about. I mean, it's all in here.
Having read that book, I can tell you it's one of the best on the topics, because a lot of books on demons and those voices go into preaching whatever religion and all that, and that's just matter of fact. It stays on facts, and it's very simple to read, and it's really a good book to understand the voice phenomena.
It is. It's a perfect book. I bought that book after I watched Sherry Sweeney's interview with Robert Phoenix, who's an astrologer, and I saw that book and I bought that book. I read it in 5 days, and then when I saw that he lived in Arizona on the back of that cover, I was so ecstatic with joy, and I knew that God brought me to Arizona for a reason. We don't know the long-term reasons why we're ever brought to any place. And I knew right away, oh, thank you so much. And I was so grateful to know that Jerry was close by. And so it just made my day. And that's when I reached out to Jerry and asked him if he'd be interested in working with me. and helping me share my story, and if I could work with him, and he said yes. And I'm
so anyway, Jinean, thank you really for your testimony. It's very, very sad, it's tragic, but it's also very uplifting, because you came out of that really on top, and you managed to go through that and to give a message of hope to other people. And that's really if there's something to retain from the interview, it's two things. It's the fact that those entities exist and that they're very dangerous. And the second thing is that the human spirit can prevail, and you're the living example. So thank you really for your testimony, for everything, for all your work. And thank you, Jerry, for everything, for all your work you do also. So
you're more than welcome.
It's amazing.
So really looking forward to speaking to you again soon, both of you. And with that, goodbye.